If you worked as an architect, you wouldn't neglect the foundation of the house, right? Well, that's exactly what you're doing if you don't consciously think about your bone density. Your bones are your body's foundation, so why are you neglecting them? Every step you take, every weight you lift, every movement you make relies on the strength of your skeleton. What's even scarier? Without the right stimulus, your bones weaken over time, putting you at risk for fractures and immobility. For older adults, a fall often means more than just a broken bone. 1 in 3 adults over 60 who suffer a hip fracture will die within a year. That's the harsh reality of weak bones, but it doesn't have to be that way. I get a DEXA scan here at DEXAFit about 2 times per year to check my bone density because it's that important. I want to make sure that my training stimulus is helping me build stronger bones. When you get yours tested, you're going to receive a result, which will be measured on this graph here. This is your bone density T-score. There's also a Z-score, but we're going to talk about that later. It typically ranges from -3 to 3. -3 being the medical definition of osteoporosis, 0 being the average, and 3 being really high. Now here's some bone densities of some people you might know within fitness. Graham Tuttle, the barefoot sprinter, comes in actually at a solid 2.5. Record-holding powerlifter Chris Duffin comes in at around 4. Mark Bell comes in at around a 4.3. Dr. Mike Israel comes in at around a 4.8. And Mike O'Hearn comes in at a 5. I got my bone density tested in January of 2024 and it came out as 7.2. This means that my bones were 7.2 standard deviations above the average.
And then your bone density has gone. I can't even believe it. I can't believe it. So your bone density has gone up from ridiculously high to almost unbelievably high.
Now, here's some context on these numbers and let's get a better looking graph. There we go. You see, bone density is measured by a standard bell curve. The average bone density of a male is 0, with about 40% of the population having a bone density of 0. In January of 2024, I was all the way down here at 7.2. You know what else is measured on a standard bell curve? Height. If my position on the height bell curve was in the same place as it is on the bone density bell curve, I'd measure it at a respectable 7'6" tall. But unlike height, bone density is something you have the power to increase or decrease. And I'm glad to say that the way I train has had a positive effect not only on my movement, muscles, but also bone density. This increase was intentional. When I train, I don't just think about what my muscles are doing. I'm purposefully thinking about how I can stress my bones, and I'm gonna teach you how to do that today. Now, I got another test in August of 2024, and I'll share those results with you at the end of this video. But first, I'm going to share with you the concepts and strategies I use when training to build stronger bones. And don't worry, these concepts will help you regardless of how old you are. We'll accomplish 3 things today, and I'll explain the 6 pillars of bone building I use on myself and clients I work with to build their bones. I'll also rank which sports and activities lead to the highest bone density based on studies and research. All studies referenced are in the description down below, by the way. This will help you understand how the activities you may be practicing might positively or negatively be affecting your bones. And lastly, after you understand how bone remodeling works and the things you can do for it, I'll give you a 3-step plan to put what you learned in this video into practice. This is your body's foundation, and I want to help you make it formidable. Getting older doesn't mean you must get weaker, so let's change that belief. And at the end of the video, you'll have the opportunity to win up to $1,500 cash by entering the Stronger Human Bone Building Challenge. You can get paid to make your body stronger. So when it comes to building my bone, I think about it a little differently than most people. And even though I'm over 30, my body's becoming more resilient than ever. What does being over 30 have to do with anything? It's well known that you'll build a majority of your bone in your childhood. You're literally growing and getting taller. Some experts go as far as saying that building new bone after 30 is nearly impossible. And there's a morsel of truth to this. Most people in the population naturally slow down or even stop stressing their bodies as they get older. Things like life, other responsibilities, settling into a sedentary lifestyle. These all put most people in a path of declining bone mass caused by a declining path of movement. They stop stressing their skeletal structure. So when they get into their 50s and 60s, the bones are brittle and easily breakable. I don't want this to be you. So let's start at pillar 1. There are so many ways to train your bones because they're not just hard structures, they're living dynamic tissues. Bone is made up of 2 key components: a hard minimal matrix called hydroxyapatite, which gives it strength, and a flexible protein framework made up of collagen, which helps it resist tension stresses. Stresses we'll be talking about soon. It's also filled with water and living cells like osteoblasts that build bone and osteoclasts that break it down, keeping it adaptable to the stresses you place on it. Osteoblasts work by laying down new bone tissue, filling in areas that need to be strengthened, while osteoclasts remove old, damaged bone, clearing the way for new growth. This constant cycle of breaking down and rebuilding is called bone remodeling, and it makes sure that your bones stay strong and resilient. It also means that bones respond to training, just like muscles do. When you place stress on your bones, it signals osteoblasts to step up their activity, reinforcing the areas that need it most. But whenever people talk about building muscle, the old adage is that a six-pack starts in the kitchen. Well, the same thing goes for building stronger bones. It starts in the kitchen. Or farm, maybe. I'm not sure. Anyway, when I was younger, you'd always see these ads that touted milk as the secret to building strong bones. And yeah, the calcium in milk does help a lot. All forms of dairy like milk, cheese, yogurt, Greek yogurt, and I really like kefir, or is it kefir? I'm not really sure, but it's really good stuff. Then we got leafy greens like collard greens, spinach, and broccoli. Actual bones in fish and seafood like sardines. I love sardines. I eat them every single day. And then we have almonds, edamame, sesame seeds. All right, cool. Calcium equals strong bones, right? Well, kinda. You need something else, or you won't absorb the calcium without this bad boy right here, vitamin D. So get outside. Get your sun even if it's overcast. Good vitamin D levels help with your body's ability to absorb calcium and put it to use. Without enough vitamin D, all the calcium in the world won't do much for your bones. And vitamin D is huge for other aspects of your body too. Muscle function, immune health, mental health, mood, hormone health, you name it. Seriously, the sun's medicine. And if you don't get much sun where you live, consider supplementing it. 3,000 to 5,000 IUs per day as an adult is a solid range of vitamin D, but some people go up to 20,000 IUs. I'm not telling you to do that though. Talk to your doctor first or try it, but I didn't tell you to. EMR Tech's red light panels also help you produce vitamin D with their UVB bulbs, which are great if you live in low sunlit areas. And for my black and brown folks living in places where there isn't much sun, you need to listen up. Our bodies evolved in an environment with abundant sun, and when we don't get it, it can wreak havoc on our health. We need to be out in the sun more than folks that lack melanin. So don't take this lightly. Get outside or invest in ways to boost your vitamin D levels. Your bones and overall health will thank you. Now, let's talk protein. Protein isn't just about building muscle, although it's crucial for it too. It also helps you produce collagen, which gives your bones their structure and flexibility. 0.8 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight is a great place to be. But the nutritional well for your bones goes even deeper. It's not just about calcium and protein. You need magnesium, phosphorus, and vitamin K2 in the mix. Magnesium helps your body absorb calcium and activates vitamin D, making it a critical part of the equation. You can find it in foods like spinach, pumpkin seeds, almonds, and dark chocolate, and you can supplement it if needed. Actually, you can add supplements for all this stuff, but getting it through food makes it more bioavailable, meaning your body generally absorbs it better. Cool? Cool. Now, phosphorus combines with calcium to form the mineralized part of your bones. You get it from meat, dairy, fish, and nuts. And vitamin K2 directs the calcium to the right places, your bones and teeth, while keeping it out of places it shouldn't be, like your arteries. You can get it from fermented foods like natto and aged cheese like Gouda. You can also get it from egg yolks. Now, you might be thinking this section's boring, but hold up. You can stress your bones in all the ways I'll be talking about in this video, but without proper nutrition, you won't get the adaptations you're looking for. Stress without proper recovery and nutrition leads to a downhill slope. So keep this in mind. Now, We're not done with nutrition yet, but there isn't much left. How about things that aren't great for your bones? Let's call these bone killers. First up, alcohol. And honestly, it's not doing anything good for you, especially when it comes to building bone. It messes with your hormones like testosterone and estrogen, which are key for building new tissue. Plus, excessive alcohol can interfere with how your body absorbs calcium and vitamin D, two of the most important nutrients for your bones. Next, smoking. Do I even need to explain this one? Smoking's bad for everything, including your bones. And yeah, I'm talking about cigarettes here. Smoking reduces calcium absorption in your gut, so even if you're eating enough, your body can't use it effectively. Over time, this weakens your bones, making them more brittle. Now, do you like coffee? How about energy drinks? Just keep this in mind and don't hate me for this. I'm just the messenger. I'm not saying no coffee or caffeine at all. Trust me, I used to love coffee, although I barely drink it now. But here's the thing, if you're not getting enough calcium in your diet, drinking too much caffeine can make things worse by reducing calcium absorption and increasing calcium excretion through your pee. Lastly, let's talk about sodium. And for most, eating a lot of salty processed foods like chips, fast food, you know the deal, can lead to calcium loss over time. That's because sodium and calcium are linked in the kidneys. When you eat a ton of sodium, your body excretes more calcium through your pee. And over time, that can weaken your bones. So if you're not very active, this is something you want to pay attention to. But here's the thing. This is where the conversation gets nuanced, especially for people who work out and for athletes.
Now, if you're sweating a lot like I do, sodium is absolutely essential because it helps you maintain your fluid balance, muscle contractions, and nerve function. You're literally sweating out sodium when you train, so replenishing it is key to performing well and recovering properly. I usually consume about 3 to 7 grams of sodium a day, which is 3,000 to 7,000 milligrams, depending on how active I've been. And for athletes, that's pretty normal. The key is to pair that with enough calcium-rich foods like dairy, leafy greens, sardines, and make sure you're balancing the sodium with other electrolytes like potassium and magnesium. So the takeaway here is this. If you're active and sweating a lot, sodium's your friend. Just make sure you're getting it from the right sources, like salting your foods and meals and electrolyte drinks, instead of overloading on processed junk food. For most people who might not be training or are super sedentary, it's worth keeping sodium in check.
Now that we've covered nutrition, let's dive into the fun part, how to stress your bones. Every method we're about to explore relies on one key principle, mechanical stress. Like I mentioned, your bones aren't static. They're living, dynamic tissues, constantly breaking down and rebuilding themselves based on the demands you place on them. This process of bone remodeling is guided by something called Wolff's Law. It's simple. Bones adapt to the stress you subject them to. If you challenge them with stress, they'll respond by becoming stronger and denser in the areas that need it most. Mechanical stress sends signals to your body that say, hey, we need to reinforce this area. Then bone cells like osteoblasts lay down new bone where it's needed. But without that stress, the bones weaken over time. That's why training intentionally to apply these forces is so important. Not just for maintaining bone strength, but for improving it. The best part is, you might already be applying some of these forces if you're physically active. So, let's start with the first type of stress, which might already be part of your routine.
I want you to do this right. Now, curl your arm and flex your bicep. Feel that muscle contraction? Here's what's happening. Your bicep is pulling on the tendons attached to your radius, one of the bones in your forearm. That pulling force creates tension stress on the bone. Now, when you add more load over time, like lifting heavier weights, it doesn't just strengthen your bicep, it also signals the bones your muscles are pulling on to adapt and get stronger. That's because tension stress happens when your muscles contract and apply pulling forces to the bones through your tendons. That stress tells your bones we need to handle more load, and they respond by becoming denser and tougher. And that increased stress over time? That's how we build stronger bones. Think about activities like calisthenics, bodybuilding, or really anything that uses your muscles actively are all fantastic for improving bone density. But this is just one way to train your bones. there's a lot more we can do to manipulate them for even greater density.
Have you heard the saying, pressure creates diamonds? Well, it can also be said that pressure creates stronger bones. There's actually research to show that powerlifters and weightlifters tend to have denser bones than the general population, thanks to the heavy loads that they regularly lift. That's because the pressure these athletes put on their skeletons through movement patterns like squats and deadlifts creates compression stress on their bones. Let's think about it. When you put a barbell on your back for a squat, or even something like a sandbag, the loads pushes through your skeletal structure. This is called axial compression, which is the force applied along the axis of a bone. This load affects your whole body, but specifically targets the spine, pelvis, and femurs, your thigh bones, and tibias, which are your shin bones. And as we talked about before, bones adapt to the stresses placed on them. This is why patterns of squatting and deadlifts are some of the best for helping build stronger bones. You're able to load the barbell quite a bit. But understand this, when you learn to lift safely, you learn to stack your joints. This allows your skeleton to be in the strongest anatomical position to move the load efficiently and safely. Now, you don't have to do the traditional squat and deadlift if you don't like them. A fantastic alternative is the sled push.
If the sled's too heavy, it just won't move. Simple as that. This forces you to learn how to stack your skeletal structure and generate force. Plus, sled pushes are incredibly safe. Anyone from your 80-year-old grandparent to an NFL linebacker can use the sled with minimal risk of injury. All pressing movements, like any barbell presses, sandbag presses, kettlebell presses, are excellent ways to apply compression stress to your bones. When you press a weight overhead, the load travels down through your arms, shoulders, and spine to create axial compression. This strengthens your bones like your humerus, clavicle, and upper spine. Even something as simple as push-ups adds a little compression stress to the bones of your upper body. And if you're up for it, handstands or handstand push-ups take it to the next level by loading your entire upper body. Another underrated way to apply compression stress? Loaded carries, like farmer's walks, overhead carries, or my favorites, sandbag carries. These challenge your bones and core all at once, making them one of the most functional ways to train for bone health. If you're in a more explosive training, loaded jumps or controlled landings are incredible for compressing the bones in your pelvis, spine, and legs. Just make sure to start light and work up gradually. And finally, don't sleep on heavy isometric holds. Standing with a heavy barbell on your back or holding a deadlift at the top creates massive compression through your skeleton without needing dynamic motion. It's a great way to strengthen your bones safely, especially if you're rehabbing or don't want to work the full range of motion. Bottom line, find the movements that work for you, whether that's barbell squats, sled pushes, using the sandbag, kettlebells, or even the Smith machine. Compression stress is one of the most powerful ways to build stronger bones, but you've got to approach it in a way that works for you and your body.
All right, next up. If we're gonna push on our bones to compress, it makes sense to pull at them too, because bones might be hard, but they're also malleable. They adapt to the stresses that we place on them, whether we're pushing or pulling. Let's start with a simple example, the dead hang. You've probably seen it before, and I love it because it not only feels great, especially if you've been compressing yourself a lot, but it's an easy way to understand the concept of traction. When you hang and relax your muscles, you create a bit of space between your joints, decompressing areas like your spine, shoulders, and even your hips. For many people, this feels amazing, especially if they've been under a lot of compressive stress. From here though, let's level this idea up. Using a resistance band, you can achieve traction while simultaneously moving through ranges of motion. For example, you can let the band pull you into a passive stretch, then activate it by pulling into a row, a curl, or even a press. This is a great way to integrate strength and mobility while still providing traction to your skeleton. Cable machines are another excellent tool. They allow you to pull at your structure dynamically while maintaining control. Pairing traction with active movements like rows, presses, or different types of leg movements can strengthen your bones and tendons while reinforcing stability. And let's not forget the sled pull. This isn't just about pulling strength, it's also a fantastic way to add traction to your skeleton. When you relax your arms and engage your core while pulling the sled, it gently pulls at your joints and stretches your connective tissue. He farted. All while strengthening you. Now, here's something important. As you're watching these movements, I want you to think not just about your muscles, but about how your skeleton is being loaded. This really smells. Here are 3 more ways I incorporate decompression stress into my training. I've mentioned this before, but flowing with a heavy rope naturally creates traction. As you move through space with the rope, it gently pulls at your structure, elongating your spine and limbs. This is why so many people in the Stronger Human community report feeling lighter and more fluid after working with the rope. When you work with a kettlebell in a flow or juggling practice, you're not just building strength or coordination. The weight of the bell creates decompression by slightly pulling on your spine, arms, and joints. You want to keep your arm relaxed and long. You're not flexing your muscles the whole time. And when you juggle, the constant catching and releasing creates a rhythmic tugging on the skeleton, adding a dynamic element to the decompression. Check out this clip from Colin Daring. He's been juggling kettlebells for over 8 years, and he's the reason I started practicing. He explains this concept beautifully.
It's almost like you need some decompression, and I think that's a lot of what you're doing when you throw the kettlebell, even without the flip necessarily. If you just throw the kettlebell up and then you catch it. You were mentioning like how you would like pull your shoulder out of the socket.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of doing a version of that, but it's like a decompression when you learn how to catch it properly.
I want to say it's more like a traction. What I notice too is when I'm teaching somebody how to juggle or flip the bell, they keep their arm like this. Right? And I'm saying free your elbow up so that it can really pull into the joint the way it needs to pull. So if I want to get the bell to the outside, I'm going to push to the opposite side because where you start helps your finish. So I'm going to release that elbow and let the weight pull, because you want to put the weight in a place to do the work for you, because you don't want to muscle the weight. You just want to guide the weight. So as you push it this way, the gravity is going to take place, and it pulls the weight away from you. There's a little pull, and you're controlling the pull through your arm, through your shoulder, and then through your grip, and then you just release it. And that release, just for that short moment of time, to re-catch it again, it just feels right, man. It feels really good.
I'll be mentioning these tools later in the video because they have another amazing benefit on your bones. But you get the idea. We can compress our skeleton and we can pull at it, both of which stimulate bone remodeling and make them stronger. However, there's still more that we can explore.
How about twisting them? They'll adapt to the stress placed on them, so it's a good idea to apply twisting and rotational forces. Here's something cool. A study looked at the bone density of female runners versus female athletes who played multi-directional sports like soccer and basketball. The researchers found that athletes who had a history of playing multi-directional sports all had enhanced bone size, microarchitecture, and strength compared to the runners who only moved in a straight line. Why? Because the multi-directional stress from sports like soccer and basketball applies torsion and shear forces to the bones, stimulating more adaptation than repetitive linear movements like only running forward. Don't take this to mean that if you didn't play soccer or basketball, you're doomed to have weak bones forever. Think of this as a sign to start stressing your bones in different ways. So how do you train this? I'll give you a few examples. Using a landmine attachment for rotational cleans, snatches, lunges, and twists creates torsional and shear forces on your spine, hips, and upper body. Pushing and pulling a heavy sled while articulating through different planes of motion stresses your bones in unique ways. Moving laterally with the sled will also stress your bones in a different way than only walking forward would. The rotational movements you work when moving with a kettlebell places different forces on the body as you move through different positions. The only limit here is your creativity.
One of my personal favorites for adding torsional stress to the bones is the mace. When you hold a mace in front of you, it creates torsional pressures on your radius, ulna, and humerus. As you slowly rotate it, that pressure shifts through your joints and bones in unique ways, stimulating adaptations not just in your muscles, but in your tendons and bones as well. Now, here's where the mace gets even more interesting. Force multiplication. Because the mace's weight is concentrated at the end of the long handle, the farther you hold it out in front of you, the greater the leverage it exerts on your body and bones. This increases the force your grip, arms, and upper body have to manage. Think of it this way. Even a relatively light mace, let's say 10 to 15 pounds, can feel exponentially heavier because of the length of the handle and the distance from your body. This is one of the reasons why the mace training feels so unique. It combines torsional stress, shear forces, and force multiplication to give your bones and connective tissues a stimulus they rarely encounter in the traditional lifts.
It strains your entire body: muscles, ligaments, tendons, joints, and bones. Honestly, it's like training with a heavy weapon, and my body thrives on it. I'll talk in more detail about mace training, but the money in the movement comes when you slow things down and hold isometric positions. Most people work the mace dynamically, keeping it moving, but when you slow it down and hold the mace in certain positions, it puts more of a demand on your muscles and tendons and strengthens those positions. It's like I'm bodybuilding, but with mace. But here's the thing, this isn't a stress you need to start with. If you're just beginning, simple resistance training with body weight, dumbbells, kettlebells, barbells, sleds, or sandbags will give your bones plenty of stimulus. Practices like mace flow or kettlebell juggling are pretty skill-based and can take your training to the next level when you're ready. They'll take time to learn, but I think it's worth it. If you do choose to learn this, a quick note of caution. Rotational and torsional stress combined with amplified forces of a mace can feel intense on your joints and tendons. Start really light. Don't overestimate what you can handle, especially with your first mace. Build strength and control gradually to avoid overloading your body.
All of these adjustable clubs and maces are available at the Stronger Human store, and I've got courses teaching you how to use these in the Stronger Human community. Links are in the description below.
So, conceptually, now you get it. Bones adapt to tension, decompression, compression, and torsional stress. By applying stresses from all directions, you're not just building muscle, you're building stronger, more adaptable bones. But guys, we're not done yet. Now, before I get into the last way you can considerably increase the density of your bones, let's play a game. Here's a list of sports on screen. If you were to rank these sports on a tier list from highest to lowest ability to build bone density on average, where would you place them? Go ahead, pause here and take a moment, make your guesses.
And while you're thinking about that, if you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel and liking the video. I'm making tons of videos just like this one that are going to continue to help you become a stronger human.
And remember, even if your sport doesn't rank super high on this list, you can always stress your bones outside of the sport to build strength and bone density. Now let's start with sports that aren't great for bone density. Swimming might be a fantastic cardiovascular workout, but the pool doesn't offer any resistance for your bones. There's no mechanical loading happening. I love it as a good recovery tool, and the body always feels great after a good swim, but it's not great for bone density. Distance running does involve repeated low-impact loading, but proficient runners tend to be very light on their feet and wear cushioned shoes that absorb all of the impact. Because of this, and potentially because many distance runners don't incorporate resistance training, studies consistently show they have lower bone density compared to athletes in other sports. The last aspect that doesn't help is the general weight control of distance runners. A lot of them keep very low weight for performance, which could be lowering their ability to build new bone tissue. Cycling is another low-tier activity when it comes to bone. It's non-weight bearing, and the seated position reduces the impact on your spine and lower limbs, leaving minimal loading on your bones. So, triathletes, I'm sorry. Moving into the moderate zone, we find sports that offer some unique bone loading benefits. Racket sports involve high torsional forces in the lower body during lateral movements, as well as significant stress on the dominant arm. A study I'll reference below highlights how these forces can enhance bone remodeling in athletes who play sports like tennis. Pickleball wasn't studied, but probably holds some similar benefits. Now, rock climbing places high torsional and tensile stresses on the bones of your forearms and fingers because of the gripping and pulling. While it's fantastic for your upper body, it lacks the high impact loading found in some of the next sports we'll talk about. But it's still solid. Now let's get into the high zone. Resistance-based sports like bodybuilding, powerlifting, and weightlifting. These are obvious contenders because they involve high compressive and tension forces on the skeleton, which we've already talked about. Field and court sports like soccer and basketball. You might be thinking that these belong in the moderate zone, but hear me out. The powerful sprinting and jumping that these sports require place high impact forces on the legs, spine, and hips, lending themselves to significant bone remodeling. All right, now for the very high zone. This one might surprise some of you, but before I reveal it, I need to introduce the last form of bone remodeling we haven't talked about yet. This will explain why the activities I'm about to mention lead to exceptionally high levels of bone remodeling when improved over time. Have you heard of the art of 8 limbs, or Muay Thai? Thai fighters are legendary for their rigorous training. But what's more fascinating is how they deliberately condition their bones. By repeatedly striking hard objects with their fists, forearms, elbows, knees, shins, and feet, they improve their bone density in these areas through something called impact stress. Here's how it works. When bones strike hard surfaces, the microtrauma caused by the repeated impact triggers a process of bone remodeling we'll call impact stress. Over time, this leads to stronger, denser bones that are better able to handle future stress. This is why I strike a heavy bag daily in different ways. The repetitive impact on my body is allowing me to strengthen the density of those areas over time. And yes, I've slowly built my ability to punch bare knuckle. I don't suggest you do this, but in a future video, I'll explain the concept of the core fist, something I learned from David Weck. It's wild how well it works for stacking bones and punching without the risk of hurting your wrists. Now, you don't need to go out and kick a tree like a Muay Thai fighter to see the benefits of impact stress. You can start with a heavy bag or something as simple as jumping rope, which I talked about in this video here. It can definitely strengthen the bones of your feet and legs. And this is why I love Vivo barefoot shoes, because they offer a wide variety of barefoot styled footwear. These are some Modus for the gym, hiking boots, casual shoes, and these are some boots I use in the gym and for hiking and for running. These are awesome because they actually help the function and strength of your feet. And here's why they work. They're wide, so your foot has the room to move freely, and they're flat and flexible so that you can move your foot and strengthen it when you're doing whatever it is that you're doing. Shoes with way too much support actually weaken your feet over time, creating a dependency on cushion that makes them even weaker. But switching to barefoot shoes, that'll really change things for you. You'll be improving your foot strength, and with every single step you take, you'll be building stronger feet. Now, if you're new to barefoot shoes, don't overdo it or rush into wearing barefoot shoes exclusively. Your feet need time to adapt and strengthen gradually, and you can check out my foot strengthening video for tips on transitioning safely. So if you're ready to make the switch, head to vivobarefoot.com and use my 20% discount code in the description. It's a small change that can make a big difference for your bones, feet, and movement. Now, it's not just Thai fighters who benefit from impact stress. Other martial artists do this too. Take boxers and MMA fighters. Outside of actual fighting, which results in them taking impact from striking the opponent or taking strikes themselves, it's common for them to condition their bodies by willingly taking punches in training, which not only improves their ability to absorb impact, but likely increases the density of their rib cages over time. Grappling sports like wrestling, judo, and jiu-jitsu are also excellent for bone remodeling. These sports create high levels of stress on the body through repeated falling, pushing, pulling, and pressure placed on by an opponent. If you've grappled before, you know how physically demanding these sports are. The way you feel after a grappling session is just different from other sports. Your bones and muscles adapt to constant pressure, making your body tougher and more resilient. Now, let's step out of the fighting context for a moment and look at a different kind of athlete. Let's start with sprinters. When you're sprinting, the ground reaction force, basically the impact your body absorbs with each step, can skyrocket to 3 to maybe 5 times your body weight. Think about that for a second. If you weigh 150 pounds, your legs are handling about 750 pounds of force with every single stride. Wild, right? This is why I love to sprint. This force doesn't just stop at your feet. It travels through your entire skeletal system, hitting the big players like your tibias, femurs, and pelvis the hardest. And keep this in mind. The faster you sprint, the higher those forces climb. That's why it's important to build up your sprinting skill safely. Done right, sprinting isn't just a workout, it's an incredibly potent way to make your bones stronger and more resilient over time. Now, this is super interesting. Triple jumpers. These athletes have mutant-level bones in their legs. Why? Well, when a triple jumper lands, their bones absorb forces up to 22 times their body weight. Imagine the impact of jumping and landing on that much force. Repeatedly. Your body has no choice but to adapt and get stronger. Studies show that triple jumpers have shin bones that are 40% denser and significantly stronger hip and ankle bones compared to non-athletes. This isn't just luck though. It's their training. The repeated jumping and landing forces push their bones and tendons to remodel, becoming thicker, denser, and more resilient. And it's not just jumpers. Sports like football, hockey, and rugby also lend themselves to high bone density. These sports involve consistent falling, tackling, sprinting, and high contact from other players, which apply stress to the skeleton. Add to that the strong culture of strength training in these sports, and you've got a recipe for ultra-resilient bones.
And I'm not pulling these ideas out of thin air. There's research to back this up. 2 studies, bone mineral density of athletes in different disciplines, 2010, and bone mineral density in competitive athletes, 2018. The studies are also linked in the description. But the studies show clear trends. MMA athletes, football players, judokas, and wrestlers tend to have the highest bone densities. Soccer players, basketball players, and volleyball players fall into the middle tier. And at the lowest level are swimmers, cyclists, and long distance runners, pretty much triathletes. So if you're participating in high impact sports or incorporating these principles into your training, you're already on the right track for improving your bone density. And if you're in a sport that's on the lower tier, like swimmers, cyclists, and long distance runners, add these principles into your training. Before we dive into what your plan should be, there's one essential skill I want you to master. It becomes more essential and more important as you age. Learning to fall safely. Yeah, you heard that right. While developing balance and coordination to prevent falls is crucial, falling is something that is sometimes inevitable. I've personally avoided catastrophic injuries by understanding the mechanics of falling. This skill is one of the first things you learn in jiu-jitsu, judo, or other martial arts. If you haven't had the chance to learn it yet, start here. Sit on the ground, gently tuck your neck, and then roll back and forth slowly. Now, once you've gotten the hang of this, we're going to let gravity do a little bit of the work. You're gonna put your hands here so your palms are facing the ground. Allow yourself to come down and slap your hands on the ground. What happens when you slap your hands on the ground is instead of the impact hitting your head and your back, when you slap the ground, when you hit the ground, it disperses the force along your body so that one force doesn't hit just one part of your body. Now, of course, you can practice this from standing, but this is a regression that anyone can do for now. I go into more detail about this in the Stronger Human community, but the takeaway is this. Learn to fall, because trust me, your 60-year-old self is gonna thank you. Now, with all of this information, what would your bone building plan of action be? Should you start hitting a heavy bag, taking punches to the gut, and jumping from high surfaces? Probably not. The fact is that building new tissue well isn't something that happens quickly. The body needs time to adapt and get stronger. So whatever you do, you need to be consistent and give your body the time it needs to adapt to the stress. If your body says it needs a break, back off of your intensity. The first thing to do is to get a baseline. I've been getting DEXA scans done here at DEXAFit for years, and you can easily see if there's one close to you with the link in my description. There's an exclusive discount there for the Stronger Human community, and there are DEXAFits all over the United States. Just fill out the form and you'll be able to get an appointment with your nearest technician. The DEXA scan is the most affordable and accurate scan you can get for bone density, lean body mass, body fat, and visceral fat. This scan will help you understand your baseline numbers. For your bones, your T-score and your Z-score. Your T-score compares your bone density to the numbers of a healthy 30-year-old, and your Z-score compares your bone density to that of an average person of the same age, sex, and body size. As you make changes to your nutrition and get another scan done in 6 months to a year, you'll be able to see if your bone mass or muscle mass has increased, while ideally seeing that your body fat and visceral fat decrease. And for everyone watching this that's older, the owner of the DEXAFit I've been working with has older folks come in all the time, and she's noticed that anyone who starts training and handling their nutrition will see gains in bone density.
It was a 49-year-old woman. She had never lifted weights in her life, and she joined a challenge, a 75-day challenge. And in 75 days, a 49-year-old woman increased her bone density by 0.4.
Wolff's Law, guys. Bones will adapt to the stress placed upon them. Now, let's talk about radiation. Some people worry about the radiation from DEXA scans, but consider this. Do you take airplane rides? Radiation is measured in something called microsieverts. For example, A standard X-ray delivers about 100 microsieverts of radiation. 1 hour on an airplane ride exposes you to roughly 3 to 5 microsieverts. And in our everyday environment, we naturally receive around 10 microsieverts per day. On the other hand, a DEXA scan only delivers less than 1 to maybe 3 microsieverts of radiation. And most people only get 1 to 3 done a year. With that amount of exposure, especially considering all the health data that you get, it's not a bad deal.
Next, because I know so many people are on different training programs, I've made a bone building program that goes into everything I've explained here and more. You'll be able to take these ideas and concepts and implement them into your personal program. Or you could do some of the example programs and templates I have included. You can access that down below. Do not rush at improving the different practices I've laid out in this video. You need to take it slow, become consistent, and do what your body gives you. Everything I've laid out in this video has taken me time to learn and improve at. I've spent years learning different practices and experimenting with how they affect my body. I've slowly built these abilities and my body's reaped the rewards. So always start with the simple versions of these movements and build to the more complex, harder versions over time. I also use different methods for my recovery, like red light therapy, proper sleep, good nutrition, soft tissue work. I've talked a lot about the recovery tactics in this video here. You don't learn all of this in a day. It's a journey of constant improvement, and if you join the Stronger Human community, we can work on this stuff together. We're going to be active for years, so listen to your body and give it the time it needs to adapt to the new stressors you're placing on it.
After you get your DEXA scan done, make sure to head to the Stronger Human community for the details on how to enter the 6-month Stronger Human Bone Building Challenge. You'll have a chance again to win up to $1,500 cash and other prizes just by working on making your bones stronger. I plan to do this every 6 months, so if you see this video 6 months from now, know that there's going to be another opportunity for another competition. So, what's my bone density now? Last January, I had a T-score of 7.2, and I made a deliberate push during the year to stress my structure with everything we've been talking about in this video. And with that, my results in August of 2024 was, drumroll please, a T-score of 6. It went down. I'm joking! It actually went up by 5 points, and my T-score went up to 7.7. Yeah, 7.2 to 7.7 standard deviations above the mean.
You literally have the highest bone density that we've ever seen.
Since I've been getting this recorded, that is the biggest single jump I've ever seen in my bone density. And it gives me an understanding that I'm truly making my body more resilient with my training, even as I get older. And with that, I really hope that you set your own DEXA appointment and start actually working on building more muscle and recording and building your bone density. So check out this video here to learn more concepts about how I build bone, muscle, and movement ability. And check out this video here if you want to learn how to build your jumping ability, something that most people just stop doing as they get older.